Welcome back to the One Question Leadership Podcast. I'm Glenn Caruso, head football coach at the University of St. Thomas, and so happy you tuned in. You know, quite often we get so caught up in the daily grind of work or coaching or recruiting that we don't often take time to reflect. I would encourage everybody to take just a few minutes each day to try and see the bigger picture, to stop and realize that in the end, we're going to be judged on what we choose to believe, who we choose to love, and what we decide to leave behind in the hearts and minds of not just our players, not just our coworkers, but also our children. And remember, if we're doing it right, we're coaching football for life.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 1Q Leadership. I have two guests today with me, both of them Spartans. First guest is Ashton Henderson. Ashton is the Deputy Athletic Director for Championship Resources and Culture at Michigan State. Greetings, Ashton. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Ty.
Yes, sir. We also have Renaldo Hill. Renaldo Hill is almost 15 years in the football coaching profession, also graduated from Michigan State. We played together. Greetings, Renaldo. Call you Noddy. Thanks for joining us, Noddy.
Thanks for having me, Ty.
Yes, sir. Of course, myself, Michigan State alum. Final season was 2000. The reason I have both of you on, specifically you, Ashton, because I want to talk about this program at Michigan State. I think it's called Alumni State of Mind. And the raw version that I understand is that Michigan State is providing mental health resources for people who are former student athletes. Am I right in describing that? You want to give us a little insight on that?
Yeah, for sure, man. You're absolutely correct. I know all of us have a common thread, which is being a Spartan. And the Spartan is truly special. And it's something that, we've embraced the moniker of Spartan for life. And many folks say, when you go through the recruiting process, it's like family. But we really wanted to send a message to our Spartan faithful and their families to provide this resource. And essentially, we have an awesome program called State of Mind, which is ran by our student athlete wellness unit. Dr. Molly McQuarrie, who is the CNPC and helps our student athletes on the performance side of the house, as well as we have two clinicians, Deron Willis, as well as Shay Bruno, who help our student athletes through challenging times as clinicians, as well as help them and provide various resources to them in a variety of different ways. And we also have a care team of psychiatrists as well, Dr. Bear and Dr. Rosen, who've been amazing to our institution for over 40 years of service and more, as well as a lot of outside providers that make up our mental health team and support, Dr. Jeff Kovan and many others. But the Alumni State of Mind program is really, really important. Mental health challenges normally don't come to fruition until you leave the space, you leave home, which is Michigan State, when you're struggling with your identity of who you are and what kind of challenges life throws at you after the sport is over, when you've been in your comfort zone. So it was advantageous as a group for us to look, and I was searching high and low for resources that we can provide for athletes, and not only just former student athletes, but their families when they encounter tough times, and not only tough times, but whether it be an eating disorder, whether it be life challenges, whether it be things that they feel stuck. There's a 24/7 crisis lifeline that can be assessed at any time. So this partnership came to fruition because of a good teammate, another Spartan, Johnny Adams, who was a first team All Big Ten selection, connected me to Ryan from Hope Desk. And Ryan from Hope Desk connected me to Skywood, which is our partnership between those two individuals, where we have a concierge line that alumni and their actual family members can call 24/7 to have and seek support for mental health resources and guidance and any other life challenges that come. Because we all know, and I have teammates, always in a various era that are struggling with mental health and who they are and things of that nature. So I'm glad we have this resource. And Michigan State, again, is on the forefront of supporting their student athletes beyond the timeline of when they were on campus.
Yeah, it's what you're talking about is interesting to me. I talked to a woman named Dr. Stephanie Coakley. She's the person over mental health and wellness at Temple. And she told me that for every year that you played a sport, it takes 2 years to transition away from it, to be okay with it. And I may be off by those numbers, but it was something that was just eye-opening to me. And her and I talked a little bit about Tom Brady. No, who wants to bring up a Michigan guy when we're talking the Spartans here? But still, when you saw Tom Brady trying to retire, a lot of people looked at it and saw specifically about his wife, but whatever was going on there. But in my eyes, I saw a guy who had played football at a high level for probably 35 years of his life, maybe even more, right? He's our age, 45, 46. So he probably played since he was 7 or 8 years old and played at a high level and was winning and is trying to separate from the game when he's still able to play at a high level. So I saw somebody struggling with the issue of delineating who I am versus what I do, right? In terms of what athletes struggle with when they transition away from competing. And so to me, that's the struggle that I don't know was identified in the press. And that's Tom Brady, 40 years winning championships at a high level, right? So you talk about people that didn't play in the NFL, people who just competed in college, and they're trying to separate from something like that where most of their identity has been tied to athletics. It's problematic, right? This is what I respect about what has been built there at Michigan State back from Elliott and Zoe Guest. You start working with people as they come in as freshmen, working with athletes when they come in as freshmen to help them understand who they are versus what they do so that when they leave, the transition isn't so hard. But even then, the transition is hard. I wonder, bringing you in the conversation, Nadi, obviously the Little League football, high school football, Michigan State, 10 years in the National Football League. Now you went back to Michigan State and finished your degree and then got into coaching. But tell me about that for you, the transition from playing at a high level, coming out of the league and realizing, that part of my life is over. Was that a struggle or was it easy for you? Talk to me a little bit about that.
It was definitely a process because, you see so many guys go through it, that you maybe had mentors in the league that went through it and they're trying to find their way. Kind of listening to those guys and leaning on those guys, just finding what their transition was like. I think that helped me start navigating it before I was done a little bit. Most of the coaches and probably players that I had played with, I think they all kind of resonated that, I would probably be, coaching at some point down the road. And so I wanted to kind of take an initiative and jump into staff meetings with the coaches have allowed, start seeing if the coach would allow me to maybe present and do things in the meeting rooms, things that get that off the ground. But I knew too, if I did want to transition into whether that was college or pro, that I did want to finish my degree up. So that was the main focus of me wanting to get back to Michigan State and making sure I had that in order so that if any opportunities were to present itself, I knew that was taken care of. And a lot of times guys don't have that thought process of,
right.
Looking into. You've been either the breadwinner or you think you can play, for, how many years you would like, but sometimes the game doesn't allow you to do that.
Right.
Sometimes it hits you a little bit, faster than others. Some people don't get a chance to walk away from it on their terms. And for me, that came at year 10. Somebody, and they always say it, you're eventually going to get cut. You're either going to get cut or fired at some point within your career. And it really took year 10 for that to come to me. And and like I said, they always say you never know when it's going to come, but at some point it's going to happen. And at that, I felt good at that point that I was starting to set myself up for life after football. And for some, it just doesn't happen. Right. And you don't have those avenues to help navigate it. I know back then we didn't, or even just somebody presenting it to you, like who comes in and presents it to you that this is what life after football looks like. Nobody does it, or nobody did it back then. And I think that would have been a realistic punch, or something that said in my face that I would have had to acknowledge in that aspect, but nobody talks about it and nobody don't want to do it. But let's have this conversation now,
Right. What I heard you say, what I think is imperative, is something that Dr. Coakley said when I interviewed her. She said, if athletes will start planning early on, just picking up a hobby or just figuring out what else they're interested in while they're still playing, the transition becomes easier. And that's what you mentioned, right? You started talking, people started saying coach to you, you still had a love for the game, and you started asking if you could sit in bennies and figuring it out. So that transition became easier. The only step you had to make was finishing a degree while you were at Michigan State. I think that's interesting. Ashton, I know when you were playing, I believe you had a knee injury around the last year or two you started playing. So that kind of derailed this athletic career. Tell me about that aspect of realizing that this thing you love may be over.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to have early success in my career at Michigan State. As a freshman, I was initially going to redshirt, but we had a few injuries in fall camp, and I had to grow up really quickly. I was a buck 65 going into the Big Ten. Playing football was not an ideal sight.
I like not
lining up against the big running backs that we say week to week and pulling left tackles, and as you all know, but really grew in camp and really found who I was as an athlete, and ended up starting about 4 or 5 games my freshman year, then became a perennial starter my sophomore year, and really started to see that light at the end of the tunnel of, man, I might have a shot to go to the next level. Then, as most injuries do, they happen with friendly fire. It was during a spring game, and on a jet sweep, I'll never forget, to the short side of the field in the boundary. I was going to make the tackle, and one of my teammates was coming in, as we do, play really tough and aggressive defense at Michigan State, and swept me right under my left knee, and it really rattled me. And I was so nervous to get surgery, which I probably should have done, and I let it heal on its own, and it really didn't heal to the way I thought it would. And I went into a really deep depression as it relates to football being taken away from me. Something I've worked so hard for since I was 5 years old. My dad would have me playing in a division. I was 5 playing with 7-year-olds, running around in circles trying to figure it out. And so always being a competitor. But when that was taken away in terms of the level of output in which I thought, man, I didn't have or didn't know how to seek the appropriate help or resources about what was actually going on in my day to day. And I think it's such a positive, as life progresses, when changes happen, I'm very fortunate to this day, and I'll tell this to anybody. Mental health is wealth, and having a therapist currently still helps me through some very challenging and various times that I've had to go through, even in adulthood, from those moments of growth and experiential pieces in life. And as Black men, we don't talk about mental health is real, and things in our family. I know when folks say, "Oh, he's crazy," or this, and as you grow in life, maybe your uncle has schizophrenia, and no one ever told you about it.
Never knew
No one ever told you about, all these things that were there that I've grown to learn and understand over time. But that's just something that I'm a huge advocate for, and trying to understand that experience better for myself and provide a different space one day when I'm fortunate to have kids of my own, to let them know that it's okay to not be okay.
You said you went into a deep depression. Tell me about that, how that was managed, right? How was that managed at the time?
Yeah, I think at that time, I didn't even really understand the psychosis of the state that I was actually in. I was just kind of going through the motions. I knew my life. I had wrapped so much in my identity in football that I had to really recenter who I was as an individual. In terms of recenter, I'm a man of faith. And so in terms of really leaning in, not my own understanding, but trusting the process that the Lord was going to see me through this. So that helped me grow in my faith, to really get back to knowing that there are other avenues that I could be successful in outside of the game of football. And that's kind of during that time, I was very, very fortunate to have a lot of positive folks around me at Michigan State who helped me through this challenge and really got me back on the path, to know that I can be successful as an administrator just as I could in a pro space, and really help those young student athletes become and see themselves as more than an athlete, that truly where I'm immensely passionate about.
Did you see a therapist back then? Was that a part of the process?
It wasn't. I think that was my probably one of the greatest mistakes I made. Not really connecting with somebody about how I was feeling, what I was going through. I thought that I could manage it on my own, and I was very fortunate to eventually, have some people around me to to lead me to that, but I never took advantage of it. And that was the point. That was the mistake.
But that makes you an advocate now, right? That learning
Absolutely.
experience. It's interesting. Guys, me and Nadi played with, even myself included, my transit, it wasn't necessarily the transition away from sports, because I realized after walking on early on, all these guys are faster, bigger, they knew the game better. I was like, yeah, they all better. Let me just be out here having fun. For me, it was a transition when I graduated in 2001. And, by the end of 2001, you had 9/11 happen. And so I'm at home trying to figure out what to work. I thought I graduated with 2 degrees. I'm thinking I did something big, but it took me a long time to find a job. Now they used to worry about me a little bit. Like, I'm worried about Tai, man. You out here in LA trying to figure his life out. So that was tough for me too, right? And trying to figure out, okay, who am I? Now that I accomplished these things that I was set to accomplish, right? I'm supposed to get a couple degrees. I played football, hit these goals, and now I can't get a job. So what was the point of doing it, right? So it was a situation in that transition for me too. One guy we played with named Richard Newsom. Richard played at a high level and then ended up playing NFL Europe. And then I think he might have played arena once a little bit. But once he stopped playing, Richard didn't really talk to us a lot, right? And we bro, what's happening? And it took a little while. He did his own self-therapy, but he got back in school at Michigan State, finished his undergrad, finished his graduate school. And one thing I was proud of Richard Newsom, Skitty is what we call him, is that he realized that he was actually smart, right? While we were in school, he used to be like, man, I'm just here to play football. Like, school and grades aren't all important. Even Coach Williams actually sent me and Nadi to class with Skitty one time because he wasn't going to class. And he was like, hey, man, y'all got to figure this out because Skitty's going to be ineligible. So we had to go to class to make sure Skitty was going to class. But he realized that he was smart after he finished playing. Like, oh, I actually can do this. And he was on the dean's list and he started doing these things. So people go through this depression, but some people can get out of it on their own. Some people can't, right? The special thing about Michigan State is there are Spartans working in administration who care about the student athletes. And I think that is imperative. Now, not a knock against any other school, because all the ADs and all the deputies and all the other, they all care about the student athletes too. But when it's somebody who has been through the turmoil that you have been through at the school that you're at, I think it makes it something special. Give us a couple of bullet points on how if I'm a Spartan and I graduated, things might be great, but I start feeling a little something, whether it be something that's actually physical in my head or something that is psychological. I mean, you mentioned their resources. Like, can I actually see a therapist, or is it just a crisis line? Like, can I go get therapy if I'm here in Los Angeles? And tell me about the breakdown of how it works for somebody who was a student athlete.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing is really the educational pieces and awareness of actually knowing this exists. So for, my hope and our hope as a department is that we are sharing this broadly so that folks who, are Michigan State alums and their family members know about it. So in order to even access it, there's a line that you call 855-2-SPARTY. Again, I'll say that again, 855-2-SPARTY. And to break that down is 855-277-2789. Again, 855-277-2789 is the crisis lifeline. So you start there. And essentially, no matter where you are in the country, you can call that number and they'll provide and find resources that can get to you. And I'm very, very, very thankful. Another Spartan and family who's been lockstep with us is the Greg H. Montgomery Foundation. Their brother, obviously, Steve, Greg Sr., and Margot and many others have been true champions for this and have provided the financial resources in order for this to be a thing for us to be able to sustain this every single year. So thankful to them and all the work that they're doing to break the stigma across the country. So I can give you a prime example this year. So before the program was formally finalized and formal, if you will, just grateful the relationship I have with Ryan and Hope Desk and UHS and Skywood. I was notified of a former, Spartan athlete who was displaced in the West Coast in Arizona, and essentially they struggled with CTE, severe bipolar disorder, and some other areas of mental health struggles that was disclosed. And I remember the The his sister actually called in a frenzy about how can we get him help? What does this look like? And I'm just very fortunate to say, Ryan, I need your help to figure this out. So Ryan was kind enough through Hope Desk. They have a fund called Fund Recovery, and no matter where you are, they raise funds for folks who don't have, insurance or various opportunities. The goal is to get you help with if you don't have the means to do it from an insurance standpoint. So this individual was able to be flown back to their home state, put in a 6-week program, and is now making strides to a better lifestyle and to receive the support that they need in order to be and feel as though they matter, and their voice and the work that they have to do is going to be truly valuable for others, and their story is going to help many other Spartans and many other people. And so that's kind of how it works. No matter where you are.
Real quick, if you allow me. So you mentioned that was before you started the Alumni State Online program, but I guess that's probably the framework for how it works, huh?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
For sure.
So really, no matter where you are, you can get taken care of. That's awesome. Nadi, you find yourself now in.
Hey, talk about for a minute before you go.
Yeah.
Like, I know we got going, but you mentioned Skitty, and when you mentioned Richard Newsom, like it hit because like I think that was a big part of me going back to finish my degree as well.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Because every time I would talk to him, he sounds so enthused about what he was doing at school, what he was learning, how he was structuring his papers, all these little things, how everybody in the Clarabelle Smith was helping him, get on track, get on schedule. He was actually, I reached out to him when I was going back, and he was telling me the do's and don'ts of what not to do. Because I know he was under like the Clarence Underwood. Do they still have that, Ashton, the Clarence Underwood fund or whatever they will help guys get the the funds in order to finish the school? And he was telling me about other guys who had been in the program who tried to use the money and abuse it, and how it was sensitive, and like how he felt like pressure was on him because of certain things that happened in the past. But his enthusiasm about just going to school every day, and like you said, when you talked about us helping each other navigate through college and getting guys to class and things of that nature, like that wasn't a situation. He was using the resources. He was happy to go to class every day and be involved, and how he was navigating, going through the writing center and really working on his papers and getting things intact, and having those conversations like that was getting me excited about like going back to school. Like I'm gonna have all these resources and things, and Skitty was my roommate. Like he did it. Like all my guys got their degrees. I gotta go back and get my degree. Like you know what I mean. He's helping me open that door and really pushing forward. And I know if I had any questions moving forward, while I was in school, I know he would be a prime example because, he did it. I was 12 years removed from, playing the game until I came back and got my degree, so he was in that similar boat. So that really helped me. It really did.
Yeah, which is excellent.
Having those lines, those communication lines to help guys do it, because that's scary. People say, is football scary? I said, no, man, like going back to school after 12 years, like that was scary because we were just getting into the computer phase. We were just, I think the most we had was email, and now everything was done on computer. Like that was terrifying. True. For me, that was terrifying. Like, so just having that voice right there, like that meant the most, just to have it. I talked about the Clarabelle, and it was too, like, I was fortunate where the NFL had a program where, like, if you go back to school, you pay for it and you got a certain grade, they reimburse you. So I ended up going that route, but I did know that the Clarence Underwood Fund was there as well too. But just finding out all these resources too, and that's the thing. Like trying to help guys navigate, like the crisis line. I mean, having that available and knowing that you can use that without no judgment. Like, I mean, that's
You can't beat that, right?
can't beat
And
it.
the key in that story is actually having a resource, which was Skitty, somebody actually talking to you about, hey, you can do this. This is how I did it. Here's what can do it, right?
Yeah.
Which Ashton provides, and which you want to think this alumni state of mind provides. I want to ask you, Nadi, though, almost 15 years in coaching, now you find yourself in this mentor role. And you have seen, I'm just this is an assumption, but I think it's a pretty safe assumption. You've seen people come into the NFL or come into, because you coach college and NFL, come into professional leagues or into college and last a long time or last a short time. And now, since they look to you as a mentor, now you got to help them figure out what this transition is about. Talk to me about that role in terms of being a coach for almost 15 years and kind of mentoring some of the guys on that transition.
Yeah, and what I like to say just about this generation in whole, I feel like they have a better grasp on uh, just from our past generation.
Oh, really?
Just
Yeah.
I feel like they have more outlets, or they're doing more things outside of the sport as well. And I think that's part of having those resources available.
Right.
I don't think all those things was intact then. For us, it was more so like football or fail. I felt, just my personal opinion, football or fail. If football wasn't there, then what next? I think these guys are navigating in more things, especially in their off seasons. I think they're doing a lot more things. I think they're finding their hobbies. I think they're finding ways to match just being just all ball.
Oh, okay.
And for some, there still are some that's, I feel like, some part of our generation that it is all ball, but I think therefore a big part of it, are a lot of guys that's into other avenues. And that's one of the things that I'm always happy about, when I do talk to them, because that's the main thing I talk to them. Like what do you do when you leave the building?
Okay.
What is that? And so some guys get into flying, they're pilots, so it's all these other things. So I talk to them more about that stuff than the actual football stuff, because I want to highlight that, because football for us, I think it take care of yourself. Like if you're showing up every day, if you're applying yourself with those things, like those are things that I can tell them, like, hey, you just need to apply yourself on this end of it. But like, what does that look like when you leave the building? Like, how do you apply maybe flying to your things that you do on the football field? Like what does that precision have to do in the air when you up that high, and it has to relate to the game? Like, how can I apply that, just his off the field things, to make it tie into the game? Like, because those are the things that they're interested in too. And like, if you can apply something like that and put it in those buckets, I think that helped them give a way to navigate things. But
yeah,
I just want to explore on them as far as more what they're doing outside the building, because if I could push that envelope in it, like, football becomes easier.
That's excellent. It ties back to what Dr. Coakley said, right? Help have people develop hobbies or things that they can do outside of the sport, so that when it is time to transition away from competing in the sport, you have something else you can focus on. Ashton, I'll ask you a couple questions here before we wrap. Is this actually a part of the athletics department? Meaning, like, is there somebody in the department that's over this? Is this under your umbrella? Or tell me about how it's structured within athletics.
Yeah. So before I do that,
Yeah.
I have to say this. It was awesome to be a graduate assistant when Renaldo and Skitty was back on campus.
Okay.
It was like living the golden years
Yeah.
in Spartan, all these Spartan DB legends around you, and how cool it was. So I had to say that before. But in terms of, how we manage this, is essentially, this is kind of a third party venue for us. So it's just we look at it as another supplement, another vitamin, another additive that we offer our student athletes once they finish. So the 24/7 concierge crisis lifeline is managed by Hope Desk.
Okay.
And the partnership aspect of finding providers, no matter where you are in the in the country is managed by Skywood. So
What is
it's a labor
Skywood?
level. So Skywood is under the UHS health system,
Okay.
and so they help. If I'm in, Arizona, they would help find providers under their network
Oh,
that
okay.
fall under your
Yep.
insurance
That's
to
excellent.
help lead you to discovery. And if you don't have insurance, that's where the fund recovery nonprofit opportunity comes available to. No one will ever be turned away from care,
Okay.
which is why we invested and aligned with this mission that they have.
But if there, just like the person you mentioned in Arizona, is there a point of contact? I guess there's a crisis line, and there's what is it, 988? There's other crisis lines,
Mm-hmm.
national. But I mean, specifically, if somebody knows this person is a Spartan, so I'm gonna go back there and start because they play football there. Like, who do they? If they don't know the number, if they just call athletics, will athletics lead them to the right direction, similar to the example you explained?
Yes, so our entire anyone who works our front desk system
Mm-hmm.
or is a senior manager or a leader has this information, as well as our sport administrators. So you hear things and you get a better sense of how folks are doing or transitioning into the quote unquote real world. We want to make sure we're sharing this. We also have what's called the Spartan for Life app. So we share this with all of our former, letter winners and their families, and we are intentional about posting and ensuring that this is available. So, for example, too, once they graduation open house, which we only have 3 weeks of school left, which is unreal to final
Yeah, that's
exams.
crazy.
So while we're there, we have a presence to say, hey, should you need us, we're here for you. And that's something that's really powerful and profound as a parent to know this university, and through Alan's leadership and his vision, is committed to you once you start in perpetuity. That's
Yeah,
powerful,
that is
and
powerful,
we want to be there for you.
which is excellent. Couple questions here. First, tying back to what you said. So you were a graduate assistant when Skitty came back, and still there when Adi came back.
Yes, sir.
Oh man, that's an excellent experience, right? And then Coach D was the head coach. Like it's like you had this whole
Full,
look.
full circle.
That was awesome, man. And Ashton was a G back then. Like how you see people like I know he's climbing the ladder soon. Like
Yeah.
I just knew it. And then I think and maybe like even before I finished, like I'm off to FSU. I think he already had it set up. I think so. Like
Yeah,
you
man.
knew he was about to flourish. And crazy how I keep up with Ashton is that obviously my wife is in academics, so like, all right, where's Ashton at now? Where's that? So like, I always keep up, with knowing it, and they have a beautiful community, like just from the academic side, like they all keep in contact with each other, or at least
Yeah.
they know what each other's doing, and like, you know what I mean. So like, if I want to find out something, like, she knows exactly like where everybody's at, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah. It's excellent. Of course, did she work at Pitt?
She worked
Or
at
she
Pitt.
worked? Yeah. So she's off that Penny Samia tree, which is
Yeah.
I mean, you know how that gets. And so what's excellent about it is that people like Ashton, the people around the industry who started off in academics are like on their ways to becoming athletics directors, right? And 20 years ago, that didn't necessarily happen coming from academics or coming from that part of the college athletics house. I'll ask this last question, then we can wrap. If someone is a current student athlete and realizing, or either the coach, player, teammates, whoever, somebody on campus, administrator realizes somebody might need some help, they can go through what's called the state of mind, right? That's the current student athlete, mental health
Yes.
advocacy, mental health. So say I'm getting help and then I graduate and I worry about not having help anymore. Do I transition to the alumni state of mind, or tell me about that aspect of the transitions? Even with the NCAA coming down with new I forgot what the president of the NCAA called it, but it's like providing these services beyond graduation. But tell me about that transition. If somebody's a senior or somebody's about to leave and they had started getting help before and now they're worried about not getting help anymore, what is that transition at Michigan State?
So that was probably the impetus of it in terms of being on the front end of how we were going to manage, care for student athletes through the transformation committee and Project D1 and all these various, elements that are out there right now. So that's our whole premise was to ensure that we had something in place
Okay.
prior to this even coming to fruition.
Yep.
And one thing about Michigan State, we're always going to take care of our student athletes, but it would be a transitional period where our staff, if you are now in the alumni or qualify for that and have graduated, you would be placed into that level of care, get for a variety of different reasons, for state licensure standpoint, other things that, we don't want to kind of deviate from. And it's just very important to provide a high level of care and at an optimal level of care.
Which is excellent. Now, do you have to graduate? Do I have to be an alum? Or tell me about that aspect of it. Because we know guys. We just talked about Giddy,
you don't finish out. Yeah.
So tell me about that.
Yeah. Any, I would say, as long as you've been on this campus, we'll never turn anyone away from that crisis lifeline, regardless if he finished here or not.
Mm-hmm.
If you were a Spartan, you were a Spartan.
You're on the Spartan line.
And your life matters. So you matter. And that's the piece where no matter who calls that line, you're going to receive help. No matter when you were here for a semester, you're here for a year, whatever that is, we are committed to your wellness and well-being for life.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. That's awesome. Well, gentlemen, this has been an excellent conversation. I really appreciate you joining us here on the One Question Leadership Podcast.
Thanks for having us, Tom.
That was Ashton Henderson. He's the Deputy Athletics Director for Championship Resources and Culture at Michigan State. And Renaldo Hill. Renaldo Hill is a longtime football coach, NFL and college. And, of course, we're all Spartans. And I'm Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.